Everyone always focuses on what you should do in a given situation, but people rarely talk about when you should do it. Take a look at this clip. Luke can't shimmy here, so it's a strike throw mix-up. What should the defender do? Delay tech covers both options, right? In case you missed it, Luke delayed the crouching medium punch to beat the tech. By making the correct choice which covers the most options, Zangief lost the round. If he woke up mashing, he'd have won. Hopefully this clip shows my point. It's not just about choosing the right option, you also need to do it at the right time. Delay tech is meant to beat buttons, but it loses if the button is delayed. In theory, if your timing is perfect, you'll win almost every interaction. You'll always find the gaps in the opponent's pressure, always counter their pokes, and be almost impossible to open up. Obviously, in practice that won't happen. It's a game of trying to figure out what your opponent will do when, while also trying to remain unpredictable yourself. To clarify, I'm not saying the actual action you make doesn't matter, just that you should also consider when to take that action. The same goes for reading the opponent. It's good to learn which options they favour, but also when they like to use those options. This is a hard concept to understand and implement, but it's one of the biggest steps you can make as a player. Many players are impatient and lose because they always do everything at the first possible moment. Good timing takes a lot of experience. It's a sense you'll develop over hundreds or thousands of hours. You can improve faster by deliberately taking time to focus on it, but don't expect to master it in one day. This isn't really a technique you can apply to your game as much as a part of the game that's often overlooked. Good timing is one of the skills that differentiates top players from intermediate ones. Here are some examples of how you can play with timing. The simplest option is to delay your action. There's the delayed option you're probably already familiar with, delay tech. Teching slightly later than normal so you can still block a button. You can also use delays offensively. Instead of pressing a button immediately, do it slightly later and you may end up catching your opponent off guard. When you're plus, the intuitive thing to do is to try to frame trap your opponent, or perhaps use a slower button to try to extend your turn. As a response, your opponent might reversal, parry, delay tech, etc. Delaying your action will give you time to react to punish these options. Of course, delaying your action does lose to the opponent mashing. If you do a later button, your opponent's jab will counter hit you. You need to condition your opponent to respect your plus frames before you attempt anything tricky. Remember that some opponents can't be conditioned and will eat the frame trap every time. While delays can make your timing unexpected, it also comes with some risk. Delaying isn't inherently better, and in many cases it's worse than acting immediately. It's a tool you can use to mix up your timing, but not something you should do every time. If your opponent is delaying and catching you out, a good option can be to do the opposite. Interrupt their delay with an immediate button. You can drive rush after to extend the pressure and take your turn. Be careful though, this is a high risk option. You open yourself up to a big punish if you're doing it blindly. Only do this once you've noticed your opponent's habits and have a solid read. You can fish for a delayed perfect parry to catch a late timing. This is a good option if you're confident they're going to press a button, but does leave you open to a punish counter throw if they don't. If you choose to parry, you can do a delayed drive rush to minimize the amount of time you're vulnerable to a punish counter throw. This is a powerful option select which lowers the risk of attempting perfect parries. You should also consider your movement when thinking about timing. When do you decide to move? How often do you stop moving, and when? As with everything around this topic, there's no right answer. It depends on your opponent's habits and how they've reacted to your movement so far. When you're just starting out, you might not be thinking about how you move, but faking your opponent out with unpredictable movement is a powerful tool. Pausing your movement when they think you're going in could lead to them whiffing a big button. Going in when they're expecting you to pause might catch them off guard. Reading your opponent's timing is powerful. If you get familiar with the tempo they like to play at, then they become easy to counter. There are some obvious examples, like feeling out when they're going to throw a fireball. You can also get a feel for when they're going to approach in neutral or when they're going to back away. If the opponent is doing everything as fast as possible, then you probably won't get time to use your slower buttons. Instead, look for gaps where you can jab or reversal. If they're delaying everything, start stealing your turns back. You'd be surprised by how much of a rhythm people play at without consciously noticing. Higher level players will be better at masking it, but they still have timing habits you can catch. If you ever play an opponent who always seems to counter hit your buttons, or walk out of range at just the right time, they've probably caught on to your timings. The most important part of timing for new players to grasp is patience. By slowing down and observing your opponent, you give them a chance to reveal their habits. You need to give your opponent time to make mistakes. Many players will get impatient and rush you in ways which are easy to counter. It's easy to beat an opponent who's always acting at the earliest possible opportunity, but it's a lot harder to get a feel for an opponent who sometimes takes their time. It's also bad to play so patiently that you end up being passive. You do need to force the issue sometimes. While it's good to strike a balance, weaker players tend to veer far more on the side of being too impatient. Doing everything as soon as possible was one of my biggest weaknesses. I'd always be too quick to press buttons. I'd walk back to try to counterpoke, but I'd press too early and get beaten by the move I was trying to bait. Once I learnt to be patient, offense felt less risky. I'd get counter hit less, and I stopped being opened up when it was supposed to be my turn. The easiest way to start implementing this into your game is to intentionally wait before you take actions. Get a feel for when you can add pauses and when it's a bad idea. When you want to walk forward and start your pressure, wait a moment to see what your opponent does. If your button keeps getting stuffed, try walking but then blocking instead. Adding pauses may feel unnatural at first, but you'll eventually get comfortable with varying your timing. As I mentioned before, some opponents have bad habits that will get exposed when you start delaying your actions. There's a ton of Ryus out there that mash sweep whenever they see the opponent move. This works against lower level players, but it loses if you interrupt your walk with pauses to block. You may also catch your opponent doing reversals, DI, or other highly punishable options. When playing against a reckless player, it's always good to give them time to make mistakes. There's a trade-off between playing at a rhythm you're comfortable with and trying to mix things up to be unpredictable. My advice is to get comfortable with a few different tempos. This will give you multiple playstyles that you can switch between to mix up your opponent. For example, you could intentionally throw fireballs at one timing to trick your opponent into thinking they have a read, then change that timing. When your opponent tries to jump, you'll be ready to anti-air. Doing this perfectly is extremely difficult, and very few players truly master it. Timing is an intuitive feeling as much as it is a trained skill. You should deliberately try to get better at it, but it will eventually become almost instinctual. Hopefully this video made you think about timing a bit more. It's not just about what you do, but when you do it. If you feel like you're making the right decisions but still losing, have another look at the replay. You may find that you were doing the right options, but doing them at the wrong time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.